Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us tonight. So I'm going to read out the names as they start appearing. Do get your questions in tonight. I must thank Barrie John for agreeing to be here tonight to do this interview for an hour. This is an interview, a bit of a chat about Barrie's life, his career. It won't be a reading because I know sometimes you get people that come on and say, please, can I have a reading? Barrie does come from a very long line of people that has the gift of mediumship. He's also very much into history, and I'm also going to be talking about some of his travels and where he's worked. So I know he's mentioned the Dalai Lama. Hello, Cowabunga. I hope you're doing good. And also working in Buenos Aires, and also you're a tour guide as well, Barrie, so we'll be talking about that, which would be absolutely brilliant. So I must say hello again to Cowabunga. So that's kind of just a very, very brief hello, Richard, introduction. Is there anything else you want to add before I start asking some questions? And hello, Pat.
I think let's just go with it. I'm looking forward to it, and I want to say, it's a great pleasure to number one, for us to have a conversation, which we never manage. But also for people to throw some questions in. I'm not one of these who go, no, I won't answer something. I'm very sort of generous, I suppose, with how I support people. So yeah, let's go for it.
Amazing. Thank you. So I thought the very first question I actually ask is going way back in time to your 13th great grandmother, who was the illegitimate daughter of James the Fifth. Is that right? So fourth. Yeah. So do tell me about that, because I thought let's go way back.
Do you know? I love how you've delved into some things here. Yeah. I'm obviously very much into history, and we've done a lot of research in our family tree. And we've got a couple of interesting characters that obviously crop up, which is why I really got into what I do in terms of history. But one lady called Lady Janet Stewart, or Janet Fleming, as she was known, was the illegitimate daughter of James IV of Scotland. And it's really fascinating for us because I've always had this real strong link to my Scottish side. My mum's side was Scottish. My mum's side, mum's side Scottish, dad's side from England. But I've always felt very pulled towards the Scots for some reason, and I love Scotland. It's a place that I really hold very dear to my heart. And it was intriguing for me because I've always had a fascination with like Mary Queen of Scots. I've always had an interest in what happened to her and everything. And then to find out that my 13 times great grandmother was governess to her, and basically that would have been her niece, was like, wow, hang on a minute, this is a bit spooky now, And then, but yeah, so it was just interesting to find out. And obviously I delve into so many things now, in terms of history. But I think it's amazing what you dig up in the family sometimes, and you find out. But yeah, Lady Janet Fleming, or Janet Stewart as she was known, she actually had an affair with Henry II of France, the King Henry II of France, and his wife actually almost like threw her out the country in a very bizarre way. But again, they had a child together who went on to be quite an important character in French history. But yeah, so it's interesting, but a little bit of a story there, and I'd love to say I've got royal roots, but not really.
Oh, you could say that, I'd believe it. Thank you, Vaughn, for being here. Barrie Frankish, thank you for being here. Now, one of the places you do a tour at, now this is not quite going back so far now, but your great grandfather was manservant to Lord Byron. That's another interesting angle I'd like to ask about.
It is. And I mean, that's a totally different side. That's my dad's side of the family. So my 5 times great grandfather on my dad's side, a gentleman called Joe Murray, was employed by a gentleman called the Wicked Lord Byron, the 5th Lord Byron, as a sailor boy on the lake outside. And he used to sail about in little mini galleons up and down the lake. But then the interesting thing is, Joe then went on to serve Lord Byron, the very famous poet, who was the 6th Lord Byron. And Byron looked at Joe as very much like a father figure, a father character, even so much that when Lord Byron's favourite dog died, Bosun, he had a tomb built in the grounds that was meant to be for Bosun, for Byron and for Joe Murray. And Joe Murray's comment was, "I'm a Christian, I'm not being buried with a dead dog." But quite comically, you know, I've ended up more or less doing what Joe used to do to a point in the house, where he used to do sort of tours of the house for people. And that's exactly what I do. And trust me, I've had some very, very, very weird circumstances at that property, you know, even to the point where I've been locked in rooms, I've had my name called down corridors. I'm the one that unlocks and locks up basically in the morning and at night. And it's very weird that the things that happen, like door handles, you hear door handles being tried when you've locked a room up or walked away after a few minutes. And I just think, okay, is somebody following me around? Is there something else? And we've got many ghost stories there, as you can imagine. And I even run some of the paranormal events for the company there as well. And I've got to say, every time we put them out, they're always sold out. They're always very well attended because people are intrigued with this old building. I mean, this is a building that goes back to 1170 that really does have a fascination of history, you know, and things that come out of it you just wouldn't believe. And even on paranormal events, we've got some great photos of figures walking through walls and walking up corridors. We've had voice recordings, we've had footsteps recorded. But yeah, bizarrely. But yeah, interesting for me how one side's my mum's side, the other side's my dad's side. And it's one of the places where, again, you know, I never envisaged that would be my, I don't want to say career, my hobby in a way, you know, because as many of you know, my career in my professional career is very different in terms of what I do in terms of my spiritual and also my historical side.
Fantastic. Hello to Wayne. Hello to Jackie. I think I said hello to Vaughan and Pat, but if I didn't, hello and welcome. Thank you for being here tonight. So that's the history side, sort of, which is fascinating, and I'm sure that we could be talking about the history side of things, you know, for that's the entire show in itself. But what I'm interested in, you come from a line of people that had the gift of mediumship on your mother's side. But I was listening to one of the interviews you did with Mickey York, and you did say to him, which I wanted to expand on, that people back in the day used to do more or do something different with their mediumship that you said you don't no longer do now or can't do now. And it wasn't really expanded upon. I was just really curious to know about that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that my family used to do in those days were apporting objects, and very often they were referred to as apporting loaves of bread into prisoner of war camps and things like that, and items would come back. So this was all part of like the physical mediumship side nowadays, where it was a lot more involved. You know, we look at mediumship now, and it really is just an art of communication. It's passing on a message, but there's so much more to it, you know. And I think, you know, some of the stories that came down from like my grandmother, down from my mother down to us, was all about things moving, items levitating, objects disappearing, reappearing. And you think, well, there's got to be a lot more to this, surely, nowadays, you know. And I think one of the difficulties is that people just don't give the time to it anymore. You know, people don't sit for long enough. I mean, I've sat for physical mediumship now for probably getting on 12 years now. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, and then obviously trance mediumship longer than that. But the physical mediumship really does intrigue me, you know, and even in our own little development circle that we've had hands form in the middle of the circle that the rest of the team have seen. Unfortunately, I haven't, because I'm normally the one that's either sat in a cabinet in an altered state. And then I come around and go, did you see that? And I think, well, no, actually, I didn't. Okay. But we've even had things like children crying, names being called out as well while we're in that, you know, in a very small room. And trust me, it's a very small room. You know, we even have to move the chairs to shut the door and then put the chairs back. You know, it's that small. But, you know, physical mediumship is something that's always intrigued me and fascinated me. And there's a lot of people who I greatly admire out there, you know. Scott Milliken, who's a very good friend of mine, who really, you know, when I've seen him demonstrate, it's absolutely phenomenal, the things that have happened, you know, in terms of items moving and moving about. But I also appreciate that it's something that you've got to sit with for a very, very long time to make it work in a way, you know. And people very often ask me, you know, does everybody have the ability to be a medium? I think, yes, everybody does have the ability to be a medium, but you have to be able to give your time to do it. Okay, you have to be able to sit and give your time, and it's all about building up the energy, sitting in the power, and working with it on a longer term basis. And I think, one of the things that I see a lot now is people come into this sort of market, if I can refer to it as that, and within a matter of weeks, they think that's it. I've got everything. I can do everything. I can go and do a show. I can start doing readings. I can do tarot readings. But there's a lot more to it than that for me. I mean, I've done this now for, gosh, I lose track. I really do. I tell people 30 years, but it's probably more like getting on for nearly 40 years now. And I was I don't want to use the word privilege, but as a child, I always knew I had something, and I was never discouraged from that. People never said to me, "Oh, it's just your imagination," and things like that. And I've always found that, even as a child, I used to get very strange things. And I always remember my mum, when her friends used to appear, she used to say to me, "Oh, just go and get your cards, get your tarot cards, and do them a quick reading." And I never thought anything of it. It was just, okay, yeah, I'll do it. And people always used to say, "Well, how do you know that?" And I used to go, "I don't know. I don't know anything about it," And it just fascinates me when I look back at, let me call it the good old days, the good old fashioned sort of mediums. And one of the mediums there's two that I greatly admire. One of them being Estelle Roberts, and the other one being a lady called Helen Duncan. And they're people who I really look at and think, you have changed so much. You've made so much happen, and so many different things happen. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's lots of other mediums that I could name as well. People like Doris Stokes. One of my great mentors was a gentleman called Glyn Edwards from Stansted College, from the Arthur Findlay College. And, I think there's always time for us to sit, time to learn from each other. And one of the things I've agreed to do at the next Parameet, which is September, if I'm right or wrong. I think it's 19th, 20th, Paul?
19th, 20th, that's right, yeah. I think that's it, yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things that I wanted to do was do something a little bit different. So I've agreed to do a trance demonstration for that. So that's not a physical demonstration, that's a trance demonstration, which will be probably more vocal than anything, see what comes out. We might try a few objects on the floor, see if we can get any of them moving. But I think it's important that people see different aspects of mediumship. And I think there's a big banner there when we talk about mediumship. I normally call it metaphysical, because I think it includes everything then, what we all do, anything from healing to mediumship to psychic, etc., etc. But I just think there's a huge market for exploring.
Absolutely. And Vinny's here, Nylin's here, Layla's here, and I did see a load of other people which appeared, so I think I've missed your names here, but so apologize. I think I said Fiona, but everybody that is here, and if I've missed your name, welcome and thank you so much for being here tonight. I know your grandmother was a great influence to you, and you were very, very close to her. And it was through her that it was like the awakening, the calling, as so many of us do when you really feel that it's the right path for you. Are you happy to share how that all happened?
Well, yeah. I mean, for me, there was things that, as I say, used to happen to me as a child, where I'd see figures falling from the sky, images outside the window, and I just waved them off, if you know what I mean. I just ignored them, and I just thought, oh, okay, this is normal, in a bizarre way. And bearing in mind, this is a very, very young child. I mean, this is single figures, single digits. I wish I was in single now, but I'm not. But those sort of things. And it was only when I started to talk to the family about experiences and things that it started to make a little bit more sense with me. Why was it that I was so fascinated with different sort of genres of life, things like the Egyptians, things like Mary Queen of Scots, things like the Titanic, all these sort of things that really, for a young child, for me, it was, I want to almost call it was a little bit abnormal, if that makes sense, because I just felt these emotions from it straight away. And my grandmother, I was very close to two grandmothers, both my grandmothers, should I say. One of them was my dad's mum, obviously, and she really spent a lot of time with us, nurturing us and bringing us up and looking after us. And then my mum's mum was a very hard lady. You know, she was a true Scottish lady. You know, and she did some comical things in her time. She really did. You know, she brought some great stories to the family. But I think through that Scottish link, that's where I developed this major interest and fascination of mediumship. And, you know, do I think it probably was an hereditary thing? Yes, I do. I really do. I think it was something that came down through the family sort of bloodline that helped me get on my way. And I remember my dad's mother, when she died, my grandmother on my dad's side, when she passed away, she came back to visit me one night. She came back a few times, actually, but one night specifically, she came back, and I remember hearing music, hearing something in the bedroom, you know, and waking up and thinking, oh, I must have left the radio on or the stereo or something in those days. Nothing at all. I even moved the clothes off the bed so she could sit down and talk to me. And all I remember was seeing a wall of white light and lots, and I can only describe it as lots of figures, okay? But it wasn't visible figures. It was almost like outlines of people. Fuzziness is what I want to call it, because they seemed so far in the distance. And I remember, you know, she come and sat on the bed and she spoke to me. And funnily enough, you know, we had a little dog that was actually our family dog, but my grandmother used to look after him a lot of the time. And the next day he was put to sleep. And I always felt as though that was her way of coming back to say, I'm going to take him with me, you know, I'm taking him. And I've always had this huge belief, and it's been proven to me, that the spirit world will come and collect. They will always collect their own loved ones. And I had this with my own mother, for instance. My mother, when she was very ill, I'd nursed her for quite a few months, and she was in hospital. And I remember talking to the spirit world, as I call it, you know, and I remember talking to my mother's mother, my grandmother, where the spiritual line comes from. And I kept saying to her, what's going on? What's going on? And all she kept saying was 1111, 1111. And I was, as you can imagine, you're so emotional, you're so worked up, you're trying to deal with everything at the same time. And I never thought anything more of it. I really didn't. And I remember towards the end, you know, I'd stayed with mum quite a lot in hospital. And then bizarrely, this one morning I'd got up and from the hospital, I'd awoken on a camping sort of thing. And said, oh, you know, I'm going to go home, mum, I'm going to get a shower and then I'll come back, you know, not a problem. It's about 7:30 in the morning. So I thought I won't be long, be a couple of hours and then I'll be back. Got home, obviously had a shower, freshen up, had something to eat. And then about 10:30, probably a bit earlier than that, probably just after 10 o'clock, I got a phone call from the hospital saying, can you hurry up and come up to the hospital? And I never thought anything more of it. You know, I said, yeah, be there in a minute. So I picked my sister up. We got up to the hospital. Very bizarrely, we couldn't find a parking space. You know, in a huge hospital, couldn't find a parking space. Eventually found one. Ran over to the hospital ward and walking down the ward, and the head nurse, the sister, come running up and said, I'm ever so sorry. I've got to tell you, your mum's just passed away. And I don't know what made me do it, but I just looked straight at my watch and it was 11 o'clock on the 11th of April of 2003. So the spirit world had made it very clear to me when it was going to happen. And I also believe that from my own mother's perspective, she probably didn't want me there because we were very close. And I don't think she wanted me there. And I've always said this to people, that the spirit world want you to remember them as a well character. They don't want you to be there in those last few minutes when they're taking the final breath, because I believe they're the things that you're left with. That's the impression that you're left with. And, you know, I want to remember my mum in her happy times, in her well times, you know, when she was bouncing and bubbling. And even with that, you know, again, you know, once my mum had passed, I remember coming home from the hospital and within an hour, she was in the living room, stood there talking to me and telling me that, you know, she was out of pain anymore. And she was happy again, basically, you know, and this is where, whenever I talk to people, you know, not just clients, but anybody who talks to me about people passing, I have a huge belief that as soon as somebody crosses the boundary, crosses that borderline, there's no physical body anymore. There's no more illness. And I don't agree when people say to them, oh, they need 6 months to heal and 6 months to recover. You know, for me, the point of passing is the instant point of curing and being released from your illnesses. You know, and I've always had that given to me by the spirit world. They'll always go, yeah, when we pass, that's it. There's nothing else. But that gives me another story here where my mum talked to me very vividly about people around the bed, if I can call it that, you know, people that she could see. And she was even telling us that my grandmother was there to collect her, you know, people were in the room next door, bizarrely, very strange, you know, in a nice way. And, you know, my mum really probably made it quite easy on us that it was her time to go. And she'd always told me, she said, it won't be long, you know, she said, it won't be long. And as a child, you know, and I have to say this, as the cherished child, you know, the one that was the baby, I never wanted to hear that from my mum. But yeah, so a very moving personal story there. But, you know, it put me into a very tough position because it was a time when I wanted to walk away from my belief. I wanted to say to the spirit world, you know, if letting people suffer is spiritual, then I don't want to be spiritual anymore. Because I like to think that the spirit world take people to stop them suffering, you know, because it's time for them to go. And funnily enough, you know, I got quite heavily involved in a local hospice where families used to come and talk to me about passing. They didn't know how to deal with it. They didn't know what it was going to be like for their loved one to pass over and what would happen afterwards. And I didn't do this from any point of self-promotion. I did this from a perspective that I wanted to help people to understand that at the point of passing, your loved one is released from pain, basically. You know, there's no more medication, there's no more treatment, and that they will come back. And, you know, we still, you know, we still talk to some of those families to this very day, you know, and they'll always thank me for just being their shoulder, really, you know, and leaning on me and being able to tell me some of their fears of loved ones passing. But both my grandmothers taught me to be a very strong character in life, you know, and very independent. You know, did I ever think that I'd be doing, I wouldn't say stand up, but that almost sounds like a comedian in a way. Did I ever think I'd be doing public speaking and public talking? No, because as a child, I was a very unconfident person. You know, I wasn't very confident. And even now, you know, sometimes I look back and I think, you know, where has all this come from? You know, where has this got me in life? But I think a lot of that is down to my profession. I think a lot of that is down to my my mediumship ability, where the spirit world wanted me to do something, and I've just said, okay, if you want me to do it, I'll just get on and do it for you, and I'll deliver it. And you know, my Scottish roots, I will always be very close to, always be very proud of. As well as my English roots. You know, my dad's family are very strong sort of farming people in the Nottinghamshire area, and I'll always cherish both sides of my family.
Thank you for that. And you know, just before I read out Cowabunga's also got a note from Jackie for me to read out. But I think what you said there will give people comfort, because the amount of people, you know, and I've got my own stories of it as well, where you don't see someone when they're passing and you do feel really guilty because one thing or another you miss that moment. But I think what you said there about remembering people as they were will give a lot of comfort to a lot of people. So thank you for sharing your personal story there. Cowabunga has written it. Have you ever had the experience where a close past loved one had asked you to come with them to their world?
Well, that's a really interesting one. And again, it's something I've done a lot with sitting in the power and working with my spirit world contacts. The spirit world always taught to me of a few aspects of the other side, you know, and I won't say I've ever visited there. But what I want to say is they've given me visions or images of things, and they'll tell me stories. And I always believe that it's like a big sort of learning library upstairs, a place of education where you take back the knowledge. So when it's my time to go, I'll take back the knowledge that I've learned in this life. And, you know, I will judge things that I've done and things that have happened to me in time, where if I haven't learned my lesson, I believe that they send you back. You know, you come back and they go, right, you've got to go through this now. This is a lesson that you've got to learn. And I think it's really, really significant that we look at life as a lesson, okay, as a training aspect, if I can refer to it as that. But I think I would love to. I get very fascinated about people who cross over and come back. You know, when they talk about going to the light and seeing the light. I've never had that. I've never felt that. I've always felt the spirit world. I know the spirit world are there, and I know that they will show me what I need to know. And if they need to show me this place of beauty where they all are, this Garden of Eden, if I can call it that, you know, this real place of, you know, sunshine, fields, flowers, meadows, then absolutely, I'll let them guide me and lead me. And I know whenever it's my time, you know, I know that my loved ones will wait for me and guide me over that bridge to where I need to be.
Yeah, that's nice, and it's comforting to know that as well, and also comforting to those that are nearing the end of their lifetime as well. So this is from Jackie. Barry, I've always tried to believe my dad is now happy, very happy, and out of pain, but I was the one that did the hygiene care daily. I saw all the pain he was in, and I sadly cannot get that image out of my head. So is there anything that you can say there?
Do you know, Jackie, it's something that we've probably just been speaking about, really, where I find very often loved ones want you to almost leave them in the last few moments. And we hear so many stories where people have sat with the loved one while they're ill and while they know that the last moment's coming. And then they all just suddenly decide to leave the room to go and get a coffee or a sandwich or whatever. And suddenly the loved one passes over. And I think, for me, I think it's a little bit of almost like a dignity thing. But what I want to say to you is what you've done, and what, you know, this is a similar circumstance to what I had with my mum in a way, where you've done so much for, I think you said your dad, you know, and that basically you were there, you know, you removed all your own feelings to make sure he was okay. And I found that very difficult to deal with when I had that sort of going through a similar circumstance with my mum. But I was basically, I'll be very honest, I went for counselling, and I had to, because I couldn't understand the emotions that I was feeling. And the one thing that was said to me, you did the most unselfish thing ever. You basically said, I'm putting her in front of me and I'm making sure that she's okay more than I'm okay. And I want you to change that thought pattern, Jackie, what you've got. And I want you to think, you did everything for your dad right up until the final point. You saved his dignity. You looked after him. You stopped him going into maybe a care home or other sort of care facility, and you kept his dignity. And to me, that is something to be majorly proud of. You know, think of him when he was happy. Find a thought somewhere of when he was laughing at a party, or a photo of him laughing, and think, that's my dad. That's how I remember my dad. You know, the person that you were dealing with in the end, the illness, the things that it created. And we all know, you know, it puts people in different perspectives when they're ill. They start, you know, seeing things, saying things. They say things that they don't know at times because of medication, etc. But I think, for me, please just find that one moment of happy thought that you can think of, whether it be I don't know, a family wedding, a family party, a birth in the family, and just think of him and think, do you know what, Dad was so proud then. And do you know what, trust me, he'll still be proud now. He really will.
Absolutely. And I hope that does help you, Jackie. And also as well, there's a little thing that I can perhaps add to that, but I'll put it on my NLP and hypnotherapy page. And I'll also just send you a quick message as well, Jackie, which is something that I find very helpful myself to erase unpleasant memories from my mind and help others as well. I must say hello to Jane Harris. Thank you so much for saying hi to us both.
Lovely Jane Harris.
Oh, she is lovely. Well, like all the people on here, absolutely lovely. Yeah, I've got a lot of time for Jane. And Richard Evans is going to be leaving us now because he's got busy. But thank you so much for joining in tonight, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the catch up. Wayne says, what are your thoughts on transfiguration? You did say a little bit about that at the beginning.
Yeah, I know Wayne, and obviously I have sat with Wayne once many years ago. I'm not sure if he still remembers it, but I mean, I've worked with transfiguration, and yes, I fully, you know, we end up with an element of transfiguration and overshadowing. And I think for me, I love to watch things happen, you know, in whatever aspect. And for me, that's crossing on that borderline again of almost physical mediumship, where we're looking at aspects of the face changing. And we see this all the time, you know, and especially when people are doing trance, for instance, which is, again, a reason why I want to do it. And I've got to think how I'm going to do it, first of all, at the event at the Parameet, because I want people to be able to see my facial features when I'm talking, when things are coming through me. But also I'm aware of how I work and where I want to build up the energy and the power. So it's whether I say, whether I sit in a cabinet or not sit in a cabinet. Sitting in a cabinet lets me generate quicker. Sitting outside a cabinet, obviously you'll see elements of transfiguration taking place and overshadowing, etc. But you will see those facial changes. And again, this is where I always say to people, there's a lot more to the metaphysical world than somebody just standing up there and saying, I've got your grandma and she's given me the 25th of March, whatever, okay, or describing them. There's a lot more to it. There really is. So, I mean, anything that you can do in terms of, I'm going to call it experimenting with the metaphysical. Just do it, just try it. You'll be amazed at what comes through. And that's going back to the good old root days for me of mediumship, when people would sit for trance, would sit for transfiguration, would sit for physical mediumship as well.
Thank you. And Fiona, this is a question here of the subject I love, Barrie. Do you remember a past life of yours?
I've just got a feeling Paul's going to grab me and pin me down at the next event now when I answer this one. Lovely, Fiona. Love you to bits. I've got it. I really do. And, you know, I'm so fascinated with past lives. It's one of the things I absolutely love. And Tracy Lanham, who's a very good friend of mine that I know Paul knows as well. Tracy did me a little bit of a past life a few months ago now. And I've got to say, I thoroughly enjoyed it. But there is things that I look at what I go through in life now, and I compare them to my past lives. One of the aspects I always remember was being scared of water and afraid of this water connection, you know. And I've always felt, I've always known this in a bizarre way, that I was connected to the Titanic somewhere. And I remember once sitting with the spirit world, and we were doing things very, very playful, if I can call it that. I wouldn't say very naughty playful. We were just having fun with them. And the spirit world, and I can't remember, I've got it written down now, but they did tell me a name. They told me what cabin I was in, what stateroom I was in, which is what you'd probably expect. But they told me all these fabulous details. And when I started looking into it, and I'm thinking, this is making sense to me now. And I'm a huge believer that the people in this life that we meet isn't the first time that we've met. I believe that we have always been linked somewhere in some sort of aspect, maybe changing sex, changing, religion, changing, different sort of languages, etc. But I always think that we've always been connected, and it's a phenomenal thing that really intrigues me. And I love talking about past lives. And maybe one time at one of the Parameets, I'll talk about some of my past lives, or maybe I might even let Paul do a past life regression on me at an event in public.
That would be amazing. Yeah, I would totally love that. Absolutely. And a good chat about past lives would be really good at one point. You know, a conversation about it would be absolutely amazing. I must get this one up of Jane's. It's I never actually witnessed good old-fashioned transfiguration. I've seen changes in a mirror, both in my own features and others' people's, but I would be fascinated to see more changes. I did. So do you want to add more to that before I say my little bit?
I mean, I love Jane to bits, and I've known Jane. Me and Jane did a show again, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, Jane, if you can remember it. And we did East Drive, if you remember. And we had a great time. We had a great giggle. But, you know, it's one of those things that when I've done paranormal events, I always try and get people doing mirror scrying or something a little bit different, because, you know, even on what I refer to them as ghost hunts, and people tell me often, you shouldn't call them ghost hunts. Well, yeah, that's what it is. Even in terms of ghost hunts and paranormal events, I try and get people doing different aspects of mediumship, whether that be table tipping, whether that's using divination, glass moving, whether it's using pendulums, dowsing rods, whether it's using Ouija boards, psychic circles, you name it. There's so many names, spirit boards, etc. And I think it's so important that you try things when you go to these events. The amount of paranormal events that I've done over the years, and people don't get involved. And I always say to them at the end of the night, did you enjoy it? They say, well, not much happened. And I say, well, it won't, because you just didn't put the energy in to make it work. You know, you've got to be able to jump in and have a go. If that's calling out, if that's having a go at something, trying something you've never done, even something that you maybe are afraid to try, just remember that you're with people that are very advanced, okay? People that will look after you, okay? You know, I when I work with the spirit world, I work with them very simply. I don't believe in opening and closing. I don't believe in protection. I have to be honest, okay? I believe that my loved ones in the spirit world, my own family, will look after me more than what any prayer will, anything else. They will make sure that I'm safe and sound. And I also believe that if something does happen to me, there's a lesson to be learned from it for me as well. But Jane, you know, keep, you know, the mirror scrying, absolutely brilliant. You know, get people doing it, get them trying it, and go with it. Absolutely brilliant.
We've kind of gone down the hello, Jamie, Raven. Thank you for being here today. It's definitely going down the past life route now. I haven't read this, obviously. But Vaughn says, Barrie and Paul, what's your thoughts on people reincarnating? Do you think this is where the past lives connection with the present?
Gosh, all right, okay, we'll go down this route. We did say, didn't we? We didn't know where it'd go.
Yeah.
You know, I believe in reincarnation. Now, from what I do as a medium, this confuses people at times, because they go, well, if you're talking to my grandmother, but my grandmother's being reincarnated and now she's, I don't know, Mary Jones who lives down the street, whatever, how can it be the same person? And what I always say is, you know, when somebody's reincarnated, it's not the total person, it's an essence of me that's reincarnated, okay? I don't know, think of it as being an arm or a leg or whatever. Think of it as being part of me that is sort of regenerated. Because when I cross, I will stay in the spirit world. What happens is part of me comes back, and that's the part that I talk about when I talk about being reincarnated, that part will basically go on to be either somebody else. It might come back into the family. It might come back as a child in the family. And we hear this time and time and time again. And I'm sure as soon as I say this, people go, oh, God, yeah, I know what that means. When we look at a newborn child, and very often we'll go, gosh, that's an old soul. You know, what do we mean by that? What we mean is this is somebody that's been here before. We mean that this is a presence that has been reincarnated and will continue to move on. And I think all of us will be reincarnated at some point. Maybe it doesn't happen straight away. Maybe you have I don't know, a decade or a century of staying upstairs, you know, and I don't mean upstairs in the roof. I mean, when we pass over, when we're upstairs. And maybe there's a point there where you will only come back when you need to learn the next lesson in your life in a very bizarre way. I know this is going very technical for me now, and I'm sure Paul's going to take over this question in a minute. I don't know. What's your thoughts on it, Paul?
Well, I also say, you know, I say I'm an explorer, so I allow the person to explain how they feel. But when I have spoken to mediums about it, how they feel, and it's kind of also my feeling as well. It's a little bit like a tomato plant. You would put like seeds of tomato, but then lots of tomatoes grow. But the one tomato has kind of died and gone off into the plant, and then you've got the other side of things. So I think that the trouble is people often think of reincarnation as being it's one or the other. You know, you go from one to the other, but it's like waves, you know, and everything's energy. So I have a feeling that, you know, energy can split and go into different forms. And I did one regression. We're not taking it too much down this route, where I did actually come across someone who was having a parallel life right now, and they tapped into the parallel life. But I only sort of took the time to now, because if I did take it forward and there was something in the ether, and I also feel it's a little bit like when you predict the weather, the further out you go, the more inaccuracies there could be. And I think that goes on with life as well. If I did move forward, say a month, and this person that she was living now had an accident or something, and then that person happened, probably very unlikely, to see the recording, they may start worrying. But the person who this lady did appear to be, a lot of people saying they did come across an image of who she may have been on the internet afterwards. So that was interesting. That's Pat Coper. She's on my YouTube channel for one of the aggressions there. So it's really interesting. Most definitely.
Do you know, I love watching. I watch a lot of these stories now of children who describe circumstances of things that they could never have known. And I remember watching one a few weeks ago about a young girl that was writing in hieroglyphics. Now, bearing in mind, this was like, I can't remember, she was 3-4 years old, something like that. And she was clearly writing hieroglyphics. And in the end, when she was a bit more mature, her family took her to Egypt. And she worked her way to this tomb, even to the tomb door, and showed them the hieroglyphics on the door, and they were exactly as she'd written. And she said, "That's where I am." And she described it absolutely to an nth degree. And you know what? That to me is absolutely remarkable. But I love the way you've just described that sort of tomato tree in a nice way, or cherry tree, where, you know, it's one big one, but one of them just comes off and goes somewhere else. I think that's a lot more understandable.
Yeah, no, and Jane has just been very complimentary to me there, so I really appreciate that, Jane. Thank you so much. I think that's it for those questions so far, but do keep getting your questions in. I had a sort of idea of where we're going to go with this, but one, because we're going to do an hour's show tonight, but one I must get into, because I've got somebody who would really dislike it if I didn't say your experience with the Dalai Lama. I'd really like to know a little bit like that.
Do you know, I had the most wonderful experience here, because, I mean, this is going back to about sort of 2006. And I remember that I got invited to America to the young, that's my dog howling, by the way, apologies for that, everyone. But I was invited to the Young Presidents Organization of America, and they organized all these events over America. And this is where they invited me to Argentina. And I've got to say, the people that I met were absolutely phenomenal. And to sit on stage next to the Dalai Lama, who is I mean, I'm 6'5". I mean, Paul, what are you? You're probably very similar to me. You're not much smaller than me.
No, 6'2".
Right. And the Dalai Lama probably is about, oh gosh, I can't remember now, probably 5'2" or something. Okay. And he comes in such a little delicate man. But you know, how do I say it? He oozes energy. Okay, he just oozes energy. And this man sits next to you, and it feels like you sat next to like a huge bear, in effect. Okay, you can feel this warmth coming from him. And I remember he took my hand, and he just held my hand. And he was talking through a translator here, because obviously he couldn't speak very much English. But he was talking through this translator. And all he kept saying to me was, "Happiness comes from within. Just remember, happiness comes from within." And, you know, it was the way that he was looking at you as well. It was almost like he wasn't looking at me. He was looking into my soul in a very bizarre way. And I've always said that the message that he was giving to me wasn't for me. It was for in here. And it was almost telling me, like, not to take life serious, you know, take life as it comes. Remember to be happy. Okay. And it was just a very emotional moment, but it was wonderful. That's the only way I can describe it. It was absolutely wonderful sitting next to a man on stage who you'd heard so much about, but yet you'd never met the man. And it was just such a privilege. I don't know what to say about it, but I found it quite emotional. And especially when he sits there holding your hand. And I think it's one of those moments where no words matter, if that makes sense. You didn't speak, he'd just hold your hand. And it was strange how he did it, but he'd just hold your hand, and you got this warmth of wealth from him. And that's the only way I can describe it. But wonderful man.
I think if we all, because the words he said, happiness comes from in, if we, each of us got a Post-it note, put that up and put it next to our bathroom mirror, I think that would actually make a lot of difference. If that's the first thing you see in the morning when you look back at yourself and read those words, happiness comes from within.
Do you know, and I think there's a lot about starting the day with a positive affirmation, you know, and I've always said to people, you know, get yourself a nice set of oracle cards and pull one in the morning, and whatever comes out, you know, whether that be, I don't know, be sympathetic, whether that be, send out happiness, smile. I love the classic old phrase about smiling at people, what you see in the morning, how quickly that generates through places and through people. And we've all had it all too often where, it only takes one person who's sort of not in a good mood, and it can just bring the whole room down in a strange way because everybody sort of reflects on it. And, I think, I always post little phrases on my Facebook wall. And there was one that I posted earlier today, and it was basically about life being so short. I'm just going to see if I can find it very, very quickly, but I don't think I can because I think I've removed it. But it was about basically life being too short and to make the most of it. Oh, yeah, that was it. It's only a short trip. Enjoy it. And I thought, do you know what? That is so poignant. That really is poignant. When you're getting wound up and stressed up about things, think about all the good things. We were just on about this a few minutes ago when we were talking about the gentleman being nursed. But I think you've got to almost get yourself over those periods. And trust me, I've been there. I've been through breakdown periods in my own life due to private circumstances and situations. But you've got to get yourself to the point of thinking, I will get out of this. I will come out of this. And through the other side, it's better. There's a better side here to look at. Never hold on to things that have happened. Let them go. Walk away from them. Look at them as a lesson in life and just think, I've learnt my lesson, I'm moving on from it. And we've all had those sort of circumstances, whether that be financial, relationships, work scenarios, or even just personal friendships.
Got Diana and Lorien Jones. Hello, Lorien. Good to see you both here, and thank you everybody for joining us so far. No, I'm 100% with you whatsoever. So there's lots of amazing things happen in your career, and I think it'd be nice to mention the transition into TV work. I know you're on a regular guest on This Morning, and also appeared in, depending on which source you read, either series 10 or series 11 of Most Haunted. How did that first step to getting on TV happen for you?
Well, I mean, it was quite bizarre for me because, as I said a few minutes ago, I've never had much confidence as a younger child, and probably, gosh, I say 25 years ago. I lose track of time. But around 25 years ago, I remember speaking to Leslie Smith at Tutbury Castle that I knew very well. And she was obviously just getting into Most Haunted. And she says, oh, I know they're looking for somebody else, blah, blah, blah. And then lo and behold, suddenly out of the blue, I just got this phone call from them to say, would you come and see us at Stockport? Would you come and have a chat with us? And I went to have a chat with them a few times. And, some things, when they don't sit right for me, don't feel right for me. Simple as, okay. And I'm very much like that. I think if it doesn't sit right, then it's not for you. And we talked about Colin a few minutes ago, and I'll talk about that in a minute as well. But even before that, I've been asked to do talks. I've been asked to do talks on TV, etc., on radio. I had a very good relationship, and I still do have, with BBC Radio Notts, etc., from my local area. And they're always saying to me, oh, just come on and do a talk for us. Come on and read the papers for us, all those sort of things. But, I enjoyed every moment of working with the Most Haunted team. I really did. And Leslie Smith is still a good friend to this day. Richard Felix, I know. A lot of them I know in the team already. And I knew already in a strange way. But what I found was that it wasn't what I wanted to do. It wasn't for me, really. So we only did, I think it was 3-4 shows with them. We were going to do a live in Italy, but it just wasn't for me. I enjoy what I do, and I enjoy working with public, and I always have. And my mediumship is the one thing that I'll always cherish and value, and what I don't want to do is to lose my sort of genuine side, what I've got. So, we only worked with them on, I think it was series 10, I can't remember, 10 or 11. But, the one thing that it led me on to, and it was about the same sort of time where we started doing a lot of work with This Morning. We started doing a lot of work with sort of Gabby Logan and with the right stuff. And it was all about sort of defending mediumship, really, for me to start off with, and proving that we were all very professional, competent people in what we did. And then I started to get involved in photo readings. People would start emailing in photo readings. They go, can you have a look at this one? What do you think to this one? And I remember a show with Chris French that we did. And it was at the point where I forgot her name now. Holly Willoughby was, I don't know why I forgot that. Holly Willoughby was pregnant, very, very heavily pregnant. And I remember we were talking about one thing, and she just ran off stage in sort of fits of tears because of something that I'd sort of brought up and said. And I think for her, it was just very touching. It was very moving because of things that were coming out. But it led me on to working with some great people. You know, I remember Jodie Marsh radioing us in once or messaging us in once because she'd been driving in a car and she'd had this image sat behind her in a car, and we got her on the radio. I think that was on This Morning as well. But it was great. But what I was finding was it was like every week they wanted me on. Can you come on next week? Can you come on next week? Can you come on next week? And it was great. You know, I enjoyed it because I've always wanted to portray us as professional people. I want people to see us that we know what we're on about, you know, and I've been this huge, huge believer over all my time that we need scientific proof in what we do. We need something behind us that says there is something happening here. This isn't just Barrie making things up. This isn't Barrie just going, yeah, I went into trance and this voice came out. I want things to be noted. I want people to see how my breathing changes, how my brain waves change, how my blood pressure changes, how my heart rhythm changes. All these sort of things make an effect. And that's why I'm a huge believer in publicising what we all do from a professional perspective. I mentioned very quickly there, didn't I, about Colin and me and Paul. Yeah, we spoke about it just before we come on air. Colin was a very good, cherished friend of mine for many years, for a long, long time, and we were friends for 20 odd years. And he'd asked me many times. He kept saying, "Come and work with me. Come on stage. Come and do this. Come on stage." And I used to go, "No, Colin. No, Colin. No, Colin." You know, and he used to keep push. And in the end, when it was around, gosh, I lose track of time now. I think it was 2014. And he messaged me and he said, "Oh, will you come to Retford tonight?" And I thought, "Yeah, okay, Retford's just up the road. It's half an hour away. Come to Retford." So I said, "Yeah, fine, not a problem." So he says, "Yeah, you know, just tell them that you're here to see me when you arrive and come to the dressing room." So I did. And it was very weird because he had said to me, "Make sure you dress up smart this time," you know, because I normally just wear a pair of jeans or whatever. And he said, "Dress up smart this time." So I got to his dressing room and I walked in and he shook my hand and gave me a hug as he always did. Now, Colin was probably come up to my shoulder height on here. So him giving me a hug was quite comical. But his first words out of his mouth were, "Do you want to do the first or second half?" And that was it. And that was my first time because he said, "If I had to put you on the spot, you wouldn't have done it, would you?" And I said, "No, I wouldn't." And that was the night when he actually told me that he got obviously cancer at that time. And he said, "I won't recover from this now." And he said, "Would you support me on my final tour?" And I said, "Yeah, of course I would, with great pleasure." And it was very difficult seeing somebody who was so well known, somebody who was such a martyr, going through such an awful situation in his life, because there was times when we'd get to a theatre and he'd go on stage and then he'd go, "I just can't do it. I just can't do it tonight." And it was almost like, there you go, there's the microphone, get out quick, go out and take over the show. And that was it, you know, and that's what I had to do, you know. But, you know, he was a very good friend of mine. He really was. And yeah, he still visits me now from the other side. Let's just say that.
Yeah, and just a little extra thing which I thought I'd add there, and must say hello to Kerry as well. And I'll just pull this one up quickly before saying what's good. Oh God, oops, I didn't mean to block. Nope. Sorry, Lynn, I did not mean to block you there. I hope I haven't blocked you. Go on. Yeah, that's what I was on the tap. So I hope you're still watching, Lynn. So right, okay. So yeah, she said silence needs to block stuff. No, I think I've actually blocked Kerry. What have I done here? No, I think I've unblocked now. So if I've blocked anybody, I do apologize. So I'll read it out. Science needs to back us up, absolutely. And that's from my good friend Lynn there.
Yeah, I agree with that,
I'm going to sit on my hands before I do any more damage now. So I was just going to say that some people I know went to see Colin Fry when he did his Sixth Sense program. And the time that he was going to do the show, something got wrong with the air conditioning system, wasn't working properly, and literally the crew were going to say, "Look, we're going to call this a go. Sorry, everybody." But Colin said, "Look, I've got to do the show even without the camera running because, you know, people have come here for the information. If I don't give it, it will go." And I thought that was really generous that he actually did that and not think, well, the cameras aren't rolling.
Yeah.
Off I go. So
yeah,
that was really good. Blimey, we're almost done the hour now. I always like to finish off with like a final question or something rather than just give your details at the end. But I think it'd be an ideal time now how people can get in contact with you for readings, the events that you run, the tours that you do. So if you can give a mention of that, that'd be absolutely amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can find me all over Facebook. I'm going to be honest. I'm not a techie person at all. I know how to turn my computer on. I know how to log into Facebook. We still have the website www.barriejohn.com. But obviously, find me on Facebook. You can find me under Barrie John or Barrie John International Psychic Medium, I think it is. Have a look for us. Join us. You'll see all our events on there. So all our ghost hunts go on there. All my mediumship nights go on there. You can get in touch with us for readings if you wish on there as well. And we're happy to help you out as much as we can, even if it's just swapping a few messages and trying to give you a little bit of spiritual guidance, if I can call it that. But I'm always happy. I really am to guide you along your pathway.
Brilliant. Thank you, Barrie. If anybody wants to say when we finish off, like before we go, like just a smiley face or a goodbye or something, that'll make sure I haven't actually blocked anybody on this. But I wanted to sort of, and thank you, Cowabunga, for your very nice message there. What I want to say just before we go really is, you've had so much to your career and what you've picked up in the mediumship field. Is there something final that you say that was like either a message, or we haven't even really touched upon your paranormal ghost investigations very much? We did touch on it very briefly, but for you was just like, if you could go back in time and revisit that spiritual connection, what would be that time that you would go back to revisit, because that was like what it's all about?
Do you know, that's a really lovely question. And I think what I'd want to go back to is, let's call it my really early days, where I used to get really emotional working with the spirit world. And, when I used to sit for them, I always got this wealth of emotion come through that it'd feel like a wave taking over the body in a strange way. And that's one of the things that I miss, if that makes sense, because as I've sort of matured, as I've worked with the spirit world more and more, I almost ignore that feeling now. And I think, no, don't want the emotion, don't want to deal with it. But it taught me so much. It taught me that the spirit world are always there, no matter what we're going through. They'll always guide us, no matter what we're going through. And that at any time, whether it be day or night, you can sit there and go, I just need you. I need you at this moment in time. But never rule out those very simple circumstances or messages or signs that come through, because trust me, the spirit world will find any way they possibly can to go, I'm behind you, I'm with you at this moment in time. So for me, I'd want to go right back to my early days when I was, can I call it training? I don't know what to call it really. When I was going through my early phases, where the spirit world were more close to me emotionally, if that makes sense. So yeah.
That's a lovely way to finish it there. Barrie, thank you so much for your time this evening. And thank you everybody for watching as well. I'll have a very quick chat with you just before we go. But thank you everybody for being here tonight. It means a lot. And your questions were brilliant as well. So thank you so